So if anybody doesn't want to speak or be on camera, feel free to keep your cameras off or on if you don't mind. And then, yeah, feel free to put stuff in the chat. This will be uploaded eventually to YouTube. It takes me a little bit to get the captions done and get it up there, but I'm happy to share the recording after this meeting. And with that, thanks so much for being here. Very excited to have Laurabeth Roundy from North Fork Packing and Mandy Hereth of Springherd Farms here today to talk about how you can set your customers up for success when they're buying a custom meat share. We all, I think, hopefully agree that the easiest customer to get is one that you already have. And so keeping that customer happy is all about managing their expectations about what they're going to get back from the butcher shop, what they're buying. And so that's what we're gonna talk about today. First, though, welcome to WA Meetup. I'm Sarah Lemon. I am the local meat marketing specialist for the Washington State Department of Agriculture. So I work in what's called our regional markets program that supports small and direct marketing farms and ranches to get their meat to market. And of course, we know that that can't happen without processors at all different types of scales. So part of my work has also been to support meat processors like North Fork Packing and other folks all across the state to get set up, expand their capacity, and just generally support whatever they need for their businesses. And I'll put a link in the chat to our WSDA Regional Markets website. There's lots of great resources, including a directory of processors. There's information if you think you want to start your own meat processing business, which I'm sure Laurabeth would be happy to talk to you about. Um, and other goodies, including our kind of signature publication, the um, Green Handbook, which we are currently working on an update for and hope to have that published by conference season next year. So if you see us in person next year, pick up a new edition of the Green Handbook. Not a ton of changes, but enough that I think it's worth getting a new one. As for WA Meetup, some people are like, what is WA Meetup? And it's kind of hard to describe, but the best way I like to think of it is sort of a big tent or like a movement, a group of people where we can bring everyone together that cares about the local meat economy. So anybody from farmers and ranchers and meat processors, of course, but also folks like myself and Linda, who you heard from earlier, that are resource providers, as well as the people that write the regulations. We've had Department of Ecology on in the past, and of course, consumers, chefs, you name it. And it's just a way to get people together because this is an industry or a couple industries that tend to be pretty disparate. We're kind of all a little bit independent, working in our own niches, very focused on our own businesses. And that can be challenging when there's issues facing the entire sector, whether that's really high cattle prices, that's a good thing for some folks, less great for other folks, or issues like waste management. So it's a way for folks to share information like we're doing here today, and then also meet one another, make connections, get you to the right person at these state agencies so that you're not getting the runaround, and just generally work together to solve the challenges that are facing our industry that seem to be increasing, although we're having good opportunities to, support folks and keep businesses alive. But we know it's challenging out there, and so WA Meetup is a way to, yeah, to connect with other folks and push the ball forward. So I would encourage you to continue to stay engaged with WA Meetup. We've got Facebook and a nice website that was recently redesigned, so I'll pop those in the chat as well. Um, unless there's any questions about either of those things, I don't want to take too much more time. And I'd love to have Laurabeth and Mandy introduce themselves. And yeah, let's jump into what we're here for today.
All right, Mandy, you want me to go first?
Sure.
Okay. My name is Laurabeth. My parents are beef farmers here in Snohomish County, and in 2020 wanted to fulfill their dream of being able to control their process start to finish, and they started their own custom processing facility. I stepped away from my career as a professional musician in 2023 to manage and run their butcher shop and expand our offerings of custom processing to the community. I did this without any industry experience at all. The first day in the cutting room, I held up a T-bone steak and was like, "What's this?" Thankfully, don't worry, we had hired really high quality people to work in the shop. I, right out of the gate, was hit with a tremendous amount of conflict with customers. Everything from where's the rest of my meat? Why does my meat taste so beefy? Why can it not all be rib steaks? My meat is too fat. It's not fat enough. My bones are too big. They're too small. And there's just, I started to see a relationship between the producers that put in the time and effort to educate their customers and the ones that didn't. And what happened is the producers that really understood the ins and outs of custom processing and took the time to explain it to their customers, those customers were much more satisfied. They had realistic expectations when they picked up, and they're much more likely to refer to friends and family and be repeat customers. And unfortunately, the customers that came into this without a lot of information were not happy. There was a lot of conflict. And I don't know about you, but I like happy customers and I don't like conflict. So I set about learning everything I could about what really is custom processing, what can we offer, what do we not have control over, and started posting frequently on Facebook and updating my website. And 3 years later, I am really grateful to say we have very little conflict now. Most of our customers that pick up are really satisfied. They understand the process. And that involves really just giving information about what custom processing is to the producers. My mom, who runs about 100 beef a year and has for 20 years, had unrealistic expectations about what we really could do because we didn't really know the limitations. And so I have really enjoyed connecting with producers and educating them about what we can do, what we can't do, and being as transparent as possible. And then helping customers also understand what they're picking up and what they're not. And so I have put together a slideshow of interesting things to me that I feel like producers need to pass on to their customers so that they can be happy about it. There seems to be a little bit of a disconnect between the processor and the producer and the customer who is responsible for passing the information on. And I will say last fall, we processed almost 600 animals in 4 months for 140 different people. And so that resulted in over 100 customers a week for me. And I realistically cannot educate every single one of them myself. So we really need to form a collaborative triangle between processors and farmers so that we can get all that information over to the customer. They have realistic expectations, and then they pick up and they are happy, and they are more likely to go forward and refer on to other people to continue to support. Mandy and I had lunch last week, and we were talking about farming really is a collective effort because there's only so many customers for custom beef and pork out in the community. And if one of those is really unhappy, that is one customer that is now outside of the customer pool and isn't coming back. So what can we do to capture those customers, educate them, and have them be repeat customers? And I really think that that is transparency and education about processing.
Yeah, and I agree. It was great to collaborate with Laurabeth and be a part of what they're doing for our community, as well as just help our farm and others retain beef customers and educate them. My husband Carl and I have a beef grass-fed and finished operation in Snohomish. It was a fifth generation dairy farm of my husband's family before we took it over. We have about 30 cow calf pairs, and we butcher about 20 to 25 a year. We have a mixed breed herd. And I've just come up with a way over the years to retain customers, to kind of come up with a system that works best for us. Not that it would work ideally for everybody, but it's something that I like to share to help people sort of, especially if you're just starting out or starting to butcher more animals a year, just to keep your customers informed, educated, and keep the process as smooth as possible so that everybody leaves with a good product and are happy with what they take home and put in their freezers for their family. So I'm just here to answer some of your questions, and Laurabeth and I will kind of go back and forth as the discussion progresses.
Yeah, I meant to say before we began that they're both excited about taking questions kind of as we go along. So feel free to put those in the chat or use the raise your hand feature. And we just want to, keep this a positive, respectful space. I know there can be some tensions. Everybody is strapped for time, and the question of whose responsibility it is for education or how you get those resources, how you learn, can be challenging in a lot of situations. And so, yeah, just ask that everybody come with kind of an open mind and a spirit of working together, not placing blame one place or another. So I think you guys set that up really well. And yeah, thank you. We do have one. Chase, I see your question in the chat. I'm going to let them get rolling a little bit, and then we'll come back to that.
That question made me smile already because, yeah. I can touch on that. I have a series of about 30 slideshows that I'm going to present now that I want to present as much information to people looking to sell beef or currently sell beef or pork, and can help, maybe this information can help put together a better sales presentation to their customers. And then, yeah, I can answer in that duration the blame issue. Sarah? Oop.
I'm a real human. I just took a bite of granola bar, but then I remembered what I'm supposed to be doing. All right.
I was explaining to Sarah that I have never used Zoom in my life before, and this is my one and only PowerPoint I've ever done. So she is going to manage it for me because I was worried about my inability to put slides on the internet. Sarah, do you want to go to the next one?
Yes. There we go.
First and foremost, when you are selling custom shares to the direct to consumer, a lot of those consumers do want the byproducts. Even in the 3 years that we have been in business, we have seen more and more people looking to make raw dog food or consume liver for their own benefit. And so here's an example of the organs that customers frequently request. Legally, we are not allowed to have unlabeled, untraceable product in our freezer. So if these products right here are not claimed on slaughter, we have to dispose of them. And generally, we do not have the cut sheets for the customer before they come in. So if you're running USDA or federally inspected carcasses, that's a different thing. But for us in the custom world, I can't keep these products and put them in my freezer without being traced back to a specific customer. And so if your customer wants anything on this list, they need to claim it before the day of slaughter. And then we can set it aside, we can label it, we can give it back to them. But the worst is when somebody comes back 2 weeks later and they're like, oh, I really wanted the liver. I'm like, I can't produce it for you now. And then they're disappointed. So when you're selling, make sure that you say, hey, do you want any of these things? And then we can go from there and make sure that they get them. I included the oxtail on this list, even though it's not organ meat, obviously, and it's on the carcass. But because our facility dry ages for between 14 and 18 days, that oxtail will be completely dried out by the time we go to the cutting room. And so I've gotten accusations of stealing the oxtail. And it's like, well, it was completely dried out. And so we're happy to cut it off, package, label it, and save it for them. But we do need to know that in advance to make sure that they get it. Also, something to keep in mind, the oxtail is part of the hanging weight, but all of these other products are not part of the hanging weight. So generally there is an additional either fee from the farmer or fee from us to process them. So presenting all of that information up front so that customers can get what they want. Next, Sarah. Moving on, just helping your customer understand the difference between custom and federally inspected meat. Custom is they are the owner of the animal, and so everything is stamped not for sale. We run into this more on the producer side when they're looking to sell smaller portions or by the cut. And so just picking your producer that will offer either federally inspected or custom. So everything I am saying today is from the custom exempt side. I have no experience with USDA processing. And so that a lot of this would maybe not apply to that. Next. So here's my cute son. There is no small business on the face of the planet that doesn't exploit child labor. But so this is one of the biggest issues that really has to be explained to a customer. If I had $1 for every time somebody picked up and said, where is the rest of my meat? I could really have a very fancy dinner. Unfortunately, the concept is so different than the grocery store where you go and you buy a cut and you get to look at it versus buying a carcass. And if a new consumer doesn't understand that process start to finish, there is no way that they are going to pick that up from me and be happy with the result. I had a customer pick up in a Sprinter van asking if they had space for the quarter of a beef that they were picking up. And I am the one that gets to wheel out their 3 boxes of meat and be like, yes, you definitely have space for that. I have put a whole trunk, a whole carcass, a whole beef, in the trunk of my Honda Accord before. So it breaks down to a lot and people don't understand that. And so taking the time with every single customer to explain that they are purchasing a carcass and not all of that is muscle, and that they will only take home the muscle part of that to eat. And it is realistically 45% loss. And I have another slideshow that explains why that is, so you can further. I like to use this example. When we first got off the ground, we had 2 beef come in via mobile slaughter. So I had never discussed anything with the farmer before. I'd never met them. And they sent 2 Hamburger cows. And those were all into quarters. So there was 8 customers, and all 8 of those customers that picked up from me that day expected the carcass weight as their take-home weight, because there was no description done to these consumers that they were buying. When you get a burger cow, you get about 50% back. And so that was 8 people that were unhappy with me, unhappy with the farmer, and just a little bit of explanation about hanging weight, carcass weight to take home weight would have prevented that. Next. So another thing that is important for consumers of beef, this is not relevant to pork because pork does not dry age. Pork goes rancid and it needs to be cut up as soon as possible. But beef, one of the neat things about custom beef is that it is dry aged versus when you go to the grocery store, that meat has not been dry aged, that has been wet aged, and that's a different product entirely. When we are dry aging, your carcass loses 1/3% of its weight per day. So by the time we cut it up 2 weeks later, it has now lost, I'm not good at mental math, but it's lost a decent percentage of its hanging weight already just in moisture. And so in your sales pitch of educating customers about what they're buying, just really hammering home the benefits of dry aged beef. It tastes beefier, it is more tender, and then things like the Hamburger have the moisture taken out of them so they don't shrink in the frying pan. I think, and I don't know if you had grocery store versus dry aged beef recently. I have, I eat a lot of our own product. It's amazing the flavor that's enhanced from dry aging, and that's kind of unique to our USDA small scale places do this too, but just it is a huge advantage. And consumers generally, when they pick up, they don't even understand why there's been a 3-week delay from slaughter to pickup. So I'd love to see producers really talk about the advantages of dry aging. And that's part of what they're paying us to do. Our power bill is insane, so setting up to do this is quite a bit to have the infrastructure to hang carcasses for a while. Next. One of the misconceptions as a producer is that dry aging longer is better. And that is not always the case. You can see on the left, now this is not a fair comparison because on the left here is a bull. And then on the right is a 500-pound carcass per half, well-fed alfalfa finished. But these are not going to dry age the same. The carcass on the left is going to dry out almost immediately and it will not be able to hang very long. So if we tried to take that and hang it for 20 days, or which is what people tend to want when they bring in a bull, is it will dry out and it will have a horrible take-home percentage. And when that customer picks up, they're going to be like, where's the rest of my meat? And so this is kind of a different topic entirely. But if you are going to send carcasses, beef carcasses, to a custom processor, ensuring that they are in condition and have enough fat cover to dry age for a while would make a better product because then it doesn't dry out. The beef on the left, we ended up cutting after 5 days because it was just not hanging and they had wanted to hang it for 2 weeks. Also, most custom processors hang the beef in quarters because we are not set up, we're not mechanized like a USDA facility to handle half a beef carcasses. Like this half a beef on the right here weighed 500 pounds. And so we hang in quarters, which means more exposed carcasses, which means more loss. So we have to cut them up. Anything after 21 days is you are losing the value of dry aging and now you're just losing your carcass. It is also hard to keep bacteria down from growing. So that cooler really needs to be 34 degrees. And even at that, after 21 days, they can start to grow mold and we don't want that. So that sweet spot is between like 14 and 18 days if it has enough fat cover. So that is not necessarily information for the customer as much as it is for the farmer to consider. Next. So pork processing, and I get asked all the time, will you dry age my pork? And I'm like, absolutely not, because pork is not like beef. After it is down to temperature is the best time to cut it. So you want your pork cut up in 24 to 48 hours. Pork fat goes rancid and the meat doesn't benefit from dry aging. So the turnaround with pork is a lot faster. So with pork consumers, you don't have to explain the 3-week delay. Usually they can pick up within a week. Next. So pork is a neat product because you really get a lot of bang for your buck, but you still do have to explain to your consumer the loss. But we have seen pork take home, and this is a real life example. This is a real picture, the real carcass and the real waste from a pork that we processed. Pork, you take home a lot of the product, which is really nice for the consumer. You get a lot of value. So the live weight for this pig was 301 pounds. After slaughter, the carcass was 214 pounds. And then after processing, that was 158 pounds of meat that they took home. And we did not weigh the fat because I don't consider that to be edible product. Even though it's a byproduct people love and use and we love that, I did not include that in a 74% take home. So if you are selling pork carcasses, you could explain that they will take home about 70% is what we've seen, 70 to 74% of the carcass to the take-home meat. And it's also better to put realistic expectations in there. So if you tell your customer, oh yeah, you'll take home 75%, but then the carcass comes in really fat, that's not true. And then they're not going to be happy. So with pork, 70 to 74%, not including the extra fat if they want to take that home. Next, Sarah. And then here's another just realistic expectation for teaching your customers from on the pork take-home side. I thought this was a neat example on the left. These are two different things here. On the left, we had a 92-pound pork carcass where they asked us to grind everything, and they took home 71.7% of that in meat after we boned everything out. So I think that's a great example of what high-value pork carcasses are, and you get to take home a lot. And then on the right, here's another example. A 105-pound carcass is taking home about 69.3% of it in meat. So I think that based off of my data and experience, that 70% take-home number is really realistic for pork product. Next. Here is a great example of when customers pick up and they say, where is my meat? the truth of the matter is that it's not always meat, and there isn't anything the processor can do about that. So here's a good example of a pig that was fed too long. This would have been much better off to go to the processor months prior. Pork, the muscle only gets so big, and then the rest of it, you're just feeding it and you're putting on fat. Sometimes that's the goal, right? People are raising lard pigs on purpose and they take the fat and they render it, but usually direct to consumer meat consumers want meat, not fat. And so this would have been better to have been processed months earlier. And then also, you know, this is hard when customers pick up and they don't understand that what they bought was fat, not muscle. And so that's a hard one. Back to Chase's question of like the blame game. This is something I snapped a picture of and sent over to the producer and was like, hey, heads up, this is what they're getting. Next. And then a lamb, we also process lamb for those of you that are sending in lamb. This is a good example of what a whole lamb carcass would break down to. It's usually just one box of meat. A nice hanging weight for a lamb is between 50 and 60 pounds, and they usually take home 2/3 of that in meat. I don't have a ton of data as we haven't processed a ton of lamb, but I think realistically 2/3 of the carcass to the meat take home is a good target on lamb. Next. And so most of what we process is beef, and really setting up realistic expectations about how much they're going to take home, having visuals. And I have people ask me all the time, how much cubic feet should I need either to pick up or for their freezer? And I don't know about you, but I have a really hard time conceptualizing what a cubic foot is. And so this number here on the right, 4 cubic feet for a quarter of a beef, is really hard in my brain to picture. But if you say 3 medicine cabinet, or not medicine, what are those called? File cabinet drawer. Our boxes are approximately file cabinet drawer sized. If you can picture 3 file cabinet drawers full of meat, that is a realistic take home for an average quarter of a beef. And then all the way on the left is a whole beef, which would be 4 times that. So this is really what consumers get caught off guard when they pick up from the processor. You know, they're excited for their half a beef. They've never bought a half a beef before. And then we bring out what's in that middle picture there. And they had unmet expectations about what they would be taking home and can end up disappointed about it. And there isn't anything we can do about that. So we would love to set up customers with really realistic, like this is what it looks like, this is how much you're taking home. So providing your customers with pictures of what a half a beef looks like, working with your processor that you use to, how do they package it? What do they expect it to look like when they pick up? This is such a hard industry because consumers are used to going to Safeway, looking at it, deciding to buy it, and then they know already what it looks like. Versus here, they have no concept of what it's going to look like. So providing pictures of your processor's product and being like, this is what a quarter looks like, this is what a half looks like. When those customers pick up, they already know and they're already excited about it because they decided to buy it based off of that. Next, Sarah. I'm talking fast, but I really do want to get through all of this and not lose you guys. So here's an example of a half a beef, 440-pound carcass, which is a nice sized beef. That's above average on size. This customer took home 261 pounds of meat, and they needed approximately 8 cubic feet, which again is super hard for me to conceptualize what that really means. But just providing your customers with pictures of like, this is what an average half a beef looks like take home would go a long ways towards eliminating any kind of conflict on the pickup side. Next. Now, I don't know if this is more helpful for producers or for their customers, so I threw in this information here. These are all of the things that contribute to why they are only taking home 55 to 59% of a carcass. And we noticed that beef that is dry aged longer, you do take home less of it. You have to cut off the exterior, and also it loses moisture. When customers do not select bone-in cuts, when they don't take home soup bones, when they don't take home short ribs, when they don't take home the chuck roast, and we have to bone all of that out, they are not getting the weight in bones. The exterior trim comes from aging. It will be dry aged and does not go in the burger. So it has to be cut off and disposed of. The biggest thing we see that really influences the take home is how fat the animal is. Referencing back to that pork that was really fat, there's not a lot of meat there. It never was meat to begin with. So if a producer is sending in a 4-year-old cow that's been grain fed every day, that's not going to result in all meat because that carcass is a lot heavier. We can take a suet, a kidney fat out of a beef that can weigh 35 pounds for just a half and throw it away. So sending beef to the processor when they're not over finished will help your customers get a better value. Another thing we see are injuries, and I have a picture of that coming up, of when you have an animal that has scar tissue in it, we have to cut all that out. They can't go in the grind because it will be too chewy. People won't like it. So we have to cut out injuries, and that can reduce your take home. Silver skin, gristle, tendons, bones, that's all cut out. The age of your animal, if you send your animal in and it is under finished, it is not really old enough to go to the processor. And we see this a lot because people have their date, they need to fulfill orders, they can't winter their beef. They can actually take home 70-75% because the animal doesn't have any fat on it. But that's not a good thing when it comes to the value, like a high quality meat, so not that high take home number isn't necessarily a great thing either. And that's been hard to convince people of, I feel. Slaughtering and processing skill, if you have a processing crew with a lot of experience and they trim things well and they cut things well, you can take home better product. And then on the slaughter side, if a carcass is dirty, it will grow mold faster. So you want a clean, well-done slaughter job. If it's a self-slaughter, which we do take in our facility, they never cut out as well because they are not as clean. And condition kind of goes back to how fat it is. Is it under condition, over condition? So all of those are the reasons why you are losing about 40 to 45% of the carcass on the beef. And there isn't a lot that the processor can do to change that. We don't feed the animal, we didn't raise the animal, we didn't pick the gender of the animal. We take it in when it's sent to us and we do our very best to do a good job processing it. And we don't get to pick the cuts, and so a lot of this is farmer and customer specific, and the processor kind of does the same thing every time. And the product is what it is. I cannot control what a customer takes home. Next. So here's an example after 1 week of cutting of what that all looks like. Yeah, thank you, Sarah. When this is after we process, this is what we are left with to dispose of. And so you can see an example there of that's the silver skin that we have to cut out. If you ever have a customer complain that their hamburger was gristly, it could have been that the connective tissue wasn't cut out. Scar tissue, bone shards, bone dust, excessive fat, all of that is what they're losing. And helping your customer understand this process will go a long ways towards customer retention and overall satisfaction. Next. Here's an example of an animal with some scar tissue. This was a really disappointing slaughter for this farmer. When you look at the back, that is where your T-bones and your rib steaks are. And all of that was deeply bruised from an animal that got hurt during transport. And so this farmer made a decision to not sell this animal and to just grind it all, because that scar tissue we would have had to cut out, meaning those customers would pick up and be like, where's the rest of my steaks? And it's not that the processor is taking them home and having them for dinner. It's that they were damaged and, we can't do anything about it. But we did communicate it to the farmer and then they adjusted their plan from there. Next. Again, this is what I would consider an overly finished beef. This was kind of a family pet cow for these people, and it was fed grain every day. And you can see how much intermuscular fat content the meat has in it and how much fat we have to cut off. And even at that, the take home for this beef, I can't remember, but it wasn't anywhere over 40-45%. And the hamburger was probably 60-40, and there isn't anything on the processing side that we can do about that. So this is an example of if a farmer is going to sell this to a consumer, I would recommend full transparency of like, it's this old, it's been fed this, we are expecting this product. So, and there are people out here that love this, especially like my generation. We love animal fat, carnivore, high fat diets. And there is a consumer for this product. But if you can connect your specific product to your specific consumer that's going to appreciate what you have, versus if you try to sell this to somebody that's looking for extra lean beef, they are not going to be satisfied with that. And we do have people pick up and be like, oh, my hamburger was so fat. And I'm like, I do my best to never compromise a producer customer relationship, but I also do want to kind of put the disclaimer out there that we did trim everything as lean as possible and did what we could for it, but we are limited to working with what people bring in. So this would be overfinished. As long as they were honest with their customer, I have no problems processing this, but that is going to result in a specific product that we can't control. Go ahead, Sarah. And then this was on a different topic, but I just left it in here anyways. These are Hamburger cows. And just an example, if you take a beef and you grind it all, kind of what you can expect from the take home. Yeah, that is such a good point, Allison. Sorry to jump in there. You do not get marbled beef and lean burger out of the same cow. So when you are selling beef on your sales pitch side, kind of identifying what your consumer is most interested in. Do they want a caveman style steak or do they want extra lean burger? And I'm sure that most farmers have animals in their herd that match up best with specific customers, but yeah, exactly. So, kind of understanding that when you grind a whole cow, you only get so much back. And I have people expect crazy things. We have seen burger cows only take home 35% because they were so fat. And we have seen burger cows take home 75% because they had no fat at all. So really just connecting that breed, gender, finish with your expectations of take home product for the producer, but also to then educate your customer with. Next, Sarah. So here is a good example of, in our shop, we weigh all of our take-home product. So we are able to kind of put together data sources for the processor, for the farmer. And so here's an example of what I would consider like an average sale. It's a 2-year-old corn finished Angus. So a carcass that's weighing 466 pounds takes home 275 pounds of meat and gets a 59% cutout. We rarely see above 60% on a well-finished meat commercial beef breed. So if you can kind of set realistic expectations of you'll take home 55 to 60%, that gives us some allowance if that animal has that scar tissue or has that fat. And then when that customer picks up, they're already ready for that. And I'm really hammering this home because it is a real issue. And I would say some producers, it's not that they mean to mislead their customers. They just didn't really know how important it really is to teach a consumer this knowledge. Next, Sarah. And another thing that we are seeing since we have been in business is the rise of the popularity of tallow. We have so many customers now want to keep their fat. And one of the things that we recommend is that they know that and they need to mark it on their cut sheet. We do not have an option on our cut sheet to package fat, so that is a special request. So when you're selling your carcass, tell your customers, if you want to keep your fat, make sure to tell the processor. This is not taken off at slaughter. This is taken off in the cutting room, during processing. So making sure on their cutting orders that they ask for fat. If they don't, we have to discard it and get rid of it. We legally cannot keep it in our freezer unlabeled. And so it is not available if they didn't ask for it. And what happens is, like, I don't think customers understand that we don't just have their products sitting around seeing if they want it or not. We can't feasibly do that. And so it is sad when someone picks up and they didn't know they needed to ask for it, and then they're disappointed because they were looking forward to it. That is always kind of a hard one. There are 2 different types of fat on a beef carcass. There is the kidney fat, which is a harder, cleaner fat, and that's good for rendering for eating, for tallow. And then there is the trim fat, which is really good for making soap, lip balm, or adding to, we process for people that also hunt and they want to take their trim fat to add to value added stuff at home. So just giving your customers some information about, yes, the fat is available. Yes, you have to ask for it. And then also kind of maybe if you want to supply some things they can do with it. Another tough topic is if you send an animal that doesn't have any fat on it and your customer wants fat and we don't have anything to package. It's not that we stole it or wanted it, it is that it wasn't there. And we legally cannot take product off of other animals and put with their order. So once a week I have someone pick up, super excited to make tallow at home. There was no fat. Next. Another thing that I feel like has really raised in popularity in the last just our 3 years of being in business is making bone broth. I was just telling my mom, I feel like the bone broth marketing people are killing it because now everybody wants their bones, which is great. They are paying the farmer for those bones. They are paying the processor to process them. We want people to take their bones. We do give them the option to not though. Some people just don't want them. One thing to keep in mind and to help your customers understand is 15% of a beef carcass are bones. Approximately, you lose about that much in bone weight. Not all bones in a beef are soup bones. Only 3 to 5% of the weight is actually soup bones. So you can see the bones on the right here are the vertebrae, which we are not, I don't believe we're legally allowed to package those. They're not for human consumption. And then things like the shoulder bones, they splinter, they're not good for dog bones, they're not good for soup. And so keep in mind how many legs a cow has. They only have 4 legs. So if you have a quarter customer and they are super excited to make soup, they're looking forward to this product, and then they pick up and there's only 2 bags of bones, that's because they only have 1 leg worth of soup bones. And so we're seeing a lot of people that are disappointed with not getting enough of what they wanted, but really they only get what they bought. And so soup bones are marrow bones. They come out of the femur and the hind shank there. And then there's also knuckle bones or dog bones, we call them. And they're, you know, you can see the difference there. A lot of people are looking for the marrow bones. Yeah, I have it in my head that we can't package the spinal column, but really what would you do with it anyways? You can't give it to dogs and you can't make soup out of it. And so customers often ask us for extra bones, and trust me, I would love to accommodate that, but legally we are only allowed to give people the product off of their own animal. So if a quarter customer wants extra bones, we can give them bones if the other quarter customer doesn't want them, but I can't take bones from a different animal entirely and put with their order. And so just kind of having expectations of how many bones they are getting. If they want their soup bones, make sure to ask for them. There are soup bones. We call them soup bones and dog bones. Every processor is going to name them differently. But really what we're saying is people are disappointed with how many bones they're really getting. Next. And then here comes back to the comment I got before of you don't get a well marbled steak and a lean burger. But really what we run into is just a basic lack of anatomy. I get asked once a week if they only want steaks. And that is not, and I don't mean to be derogatory to a consumer, because if I didn't look at it, I wouldn't understand it either. They are buying a quarter or a half of an animal, and that includes X number of steaks and trim that's burger and roasts, and really having realistic expectations about how many steaks they get off of an animal. One analogy I like to use is that a half a beef has 12 ribs. So those are 12 steaks. So it's very common that a regular sized beef, like on the right here, they'll get 12 rib steaks and 12 T-bones. And we cannot make more of the beef into steaks than that. I frequently have customers pick up and they are upset with the amount of hamburger that they are getting because they had an expectation in their head that they would be able to get as many steaks as they wanted. So there is a little bit of an anatomy lesson that goes into helping educate a new consumer. So when in your sales pitch, when you are explaining dry age and fat and organs and all of that, having a general, like, this is what you can expect out of a quarter of a beef. You get 6 rib steaks, 6 T-bones, or, you know, working with your processor to kind of help. Sometimes bigger beef get a little bit more, sometimes smaller beef get smaller ones, but in general. And then that way, when people go to do their cut sheet, they have kind of an idea of this beef isn't all rib steaks. And so these are the prime steaks that people are most excited about. And this is realistic quantities. Another comment I get all the time is they don't want any T-bone steaks. They only want porterhouses. And that is, I mean, it makes you giggle, but really, if you didn't know, you wouldn't know. So, for example, here on a half a beef, there are only 4 porterhouse steaks. The rest are technically considered T-bones. So again, we can't make muscle out of what isn't there. And having your customer go into the custom processing experience with that knowledge, they'll be like, oh, okay, that's how many I get, versus wanting something that was never going to be, is our biggest problem. Next. It's kind of subjective, Sarah, the porterhouse and T-bone, like, it kind of depends on who you talk to. Here is an example of unrealistic expectations from a customer that did not know what was going on. So they bought a carcass that hung at 159 pounds, which is pretty small. That's not a big beef. And they wanted exactly 40 pounds of hamburger, 19 pounds of stew meat, 20 pounds of New York steaks, 30 pounds of rib steaks, 20 pounds of roast beef, and 30 pounds of short ribs from their quarter. And this is not uncommon. I would say once a week, I get a comment like this. And when I generally at this point, I will pick up the phone and call their farmer, because there's no way this person's going to pick up and be satisfied with the fact that there's only 6 New York steaks, not 20 pounds of them. So this is where having, oh my God, this is where having like a list of like, here's what you get with that beef. And this customer came from a neighbor of somebody that had 2 beef. And I'm not selling them under the bridge there, that they know that I've used this example. And they really didn't know what was going on. They didn't know what to expect either. You know, so now it's like a weird circle of they don't know. Yes, yeah, we do. It just depends on your processor. And so helping your customer know the cut sheet of the processor you're using in advance, so that we don't get things like this. And so we did work it through, and we did explain the process to him, and he did end up being a happy customer. But I ended up taking a half an hour with this quarter beef customer to sort out that expectations with him, which for me is almost worth it, because I don't like it when people pick up in and are unhappy, but at some scale, I can't do that either. So this is kind of an example of what we're up against on the unrealistic expectations. Next. Another thing that people really have a hard time visualizing is how much of what they are going to get. And so here's an example of what comes out of the chuck. This is a chuck take-home haul, and it's going to look different for every processor, but this is what someone could expect a half a beef to produce. And that is 25% of their take-home product right there. Just the chuck roast, arm roast, cross rib roast. And so just even like lifting pictures like this, putting them on your website, putting them on your own social media, just spreading the word to be like, hey, if you buy half a beef, 25% of it is the chuck. So if this customer is like, I don't like pot roast, they're going to grind all of that. That means 25% of their product is now hamburger, which some people want, but like having that information to make that decision off of when they go to fill out their cut sheet. Truthfully, before I started running this business, I didn't know this. I had my mom fill out my cut sheet for me because I didn't know or care, you know. And so having information about how much percentage of a primal is their take home, I think has helped people a lot visualize what they're getting. Next. And then another thing is the rump or the round is another 25% of the take home product. And so I have had people call me and be like, my meat was so tough. What did you guys do to it? I'm like, well, what cut did you eat? And they're like, oh, the rump roast. I'm like, well, yeah, that is the toughest cut on the cow. So having kind of a sense of how people are going to cook or what they're looking for with their custom order. And so my recommendation to new customers really is to grind all this. If they don't know what a rump roast or an eye of round roast is, grind it. These are the tougher, leaner cuts. Now they can be cooked amazing too. People love the eye of round roast for making jerky. But if they think they're going to take it home and cook it like a prime rib, it isn't going to work. And unfortunately, I don't have time to help people learn how to cook. And I know producers, like, that's such a subjective topic, cooking preference on taste. And so we love to direct people to the beefitswhatsfordinner.com website. They have put together such an incredible directory on how to cook every cut of meat that's ever been named or existed, because names are subjective too. Every processor names things differently. So again, if you have a brand new consumer, they've never filled out a cut sheet before, having expectations that the round are leaner, tougher cuts. And if they're not putting in the effort to cook them appropriately, they will be tough, and maybe they should grind them. Also, if you have a customer that wants leaner hamburger, this is a great place to get leaner. I've seen people put together cookbooks, but that is not a project I'm looking to do. I know farmers post online on Facebook good recipes and stuff like that. And there's so many resources. Like, I'll put into Chat GPT, I'll come back to that. I put into Chat GPT, hey, how do I cook a sirloin tip roast? And I get just like exact instructions, and I can't ever compete with the data that's already out there on cooking. But if somebody wants lean hamburger, you should recommend, hey, grind all the round, and then that way they will get leaner hamburger. Grinding these cuts can sway the take-home fat content of at least 5%. Next. And then, every processor cuts differently, has different cuts available. So like, this is very specific to my shop, but this is, kind of just being familiarized with the cuts that your processor does offer. And then that way you can help your consumer be ready for that when the time comes. One thing that was interesting this fall is we had a brand new customer pick up, and they were so upset with the size of their tri-tip. This is a realistic size for a grass-fed tri-tip. That is not the size of a tri-tip from a grocery store tri-tip. And so a lot of consumers that are new do not have realistic expectations about the size of the cuts. This doesn't look like grocery store meat. It's much smaller. And so sometimes people pick up and they're like, why are my cuts so small? And like, well, your beef was a pasture raised, grass-fed beef. This is what it looks like. It's not, it doesn't come off of a dinosaur. So having realistic expectations about the size of the cuts is one thing here, but also just knowing what all the cuts are available through your specific processor as a producer will help you when you have discourse with your customers to make sure they know what they're going to get. Next. Now, this is without a doubt the most contentious item that we produce, and that is hamburger. 51% of the product that we produce in our shop is hamburger. So we make a lot of burger, and sometimes people do not even understand that their order comes with hamburger. I'll get calls like, oh no, am I going to get any hamburger? Yeah, at least 30% of your take home product without grinding anything will be burger. And then I have customers pick up and they say, oh, I didn't want any hamburger. Yeah, I'd be happy to distribute this. And it's like, well, your order comes with hamburger. You don't want it. It's so high quality. It's the best hamburger you can get. What do you mean you don't want it? But some people don't understand that default baseline, depending on how your processor cuts, you'll get 20 to 40% hamburger back. And another thing that's really hard in the custom beef world is the processor has no control over the fat content of the burger. And this is really hard for consumers to switch their mind to, because when you go to a grocery store, you get to specify, I want 90-10, I want 75-25, and you pick out what you want and you take it home. When you buy custom beef, you are buying that animal specifically and then filling out the custom cut sheets. We follow the cut sheets. We grind a half a beef at a time. and it is what it is. So having your customers, bye Linda, talk to you later. Having your customers understand that they are getting the hamburger off of their carcass. It includes the cuts and the trim that they didn't want, and that is the product. We cannot control the fat content of the burger. We can't legally take fat off of other animals and add to it, and we don't really have any control over trimming off the excess, the intermuscular fat content. I mean, we can trim everything lean, but we can't cut out the bits of fat that are inside the meat. And once a day, do I have someone disgruntled with the fat content in their hamburger? And if they would have known it's just this animal and that's what I bought and that's what I got, they would already know that. And so hamburger ends up being a big unknown in people's heads. So if you can help out your processor and help your customer understand that the grind is just coming off the carcass and that is what they are getting and that is the end product, and you don't get to specify. Next. I was showing this to Sarah yesterday. This is an example of 4 different beef that we processed in one day. So do remember that custom processing is not done in a highly oxygenated, there's a word there, I'm missing it. Custom processing is not done in a regulated environment. It's just done in regular air. And so it's very common for beef to turn brown. So you can see on number 1 here, that's already started to oxidize. That brown is totally normal. That's what it looks like. We use clear casings so people can see their product. And then sometimes people don't really like what they're looking at there, but that is very normal. We don't dye it or anything. So number 1 is an average 85-15 grass-fed beef. Generally, a grass-fed animal will be about 85-15 hamburger. And then the next beef we did was a beef that was fed with corn silage. And so that had higher fat content, and that ended up being 75-25 approximately. We actually do own a tester, but we don't regularly test. Number 3 was a bull that we ground, and that was maybe 90-10, maybe. It looks like it has 0 fat at all in it. And then number 4 is my favorite example here, is a really old pet cow, 10 years old, and that hamburger was maybe 50-50. So here's 4 examples of we didn't feed these animals. We didn't choose when to send them. We didn't sell them. We don't know what the customer was told. This is just the product that was produced from their animals, and now we distribute it to their customers for them. And so helping your customer match up what they're looking for. Do they want really lean hamburger? Do they want really fat hamburger? And helping make those connections will really lead to more satisfied customers overall. I really feel strongly about this hamburger topic. I know I'm going long-winded here. Like, I could talk about hamburger for about 3 hours about everything I want them to know so that they are happy with it. Because we do want people to pick up and be happy. If people pick up and they're not happy, that's one person that's gone. They're not coming back. And that hurts the entire farming community if we don't have repeat customers. So the consumer and the producer and the farmer have to work collaboratively to make sure those expectations are realistic and that they are happy, because we want them to come back. We want repeat customers because they are a lot easier to work with because they already know the process and they recommend their friends. And then hopefully we can keep this game of local beef farm direct going. Next, and this is my last slide. I'll quit yapping. This is what I would like everyone to tell their customers. One of the things that we are up against is that there are customers out there that do not like plastic, and which I totally understand. I have wood cutting boards, I drink out of glass, but there is no long-term freezer solution for meat that isn't plastic. Even butcher paper has plastic underneath it. And so we deal probably once a week with somebody that wasn't understanding that this product would be wrapped in plastic. And as far as I know, there is no freezer over a year or whatever that won't be wrapped in plastic. So that's an unrealistic expectation. We've had people ask us to pack their meat in glass jars. We've asked people to use beeswax or just paper, no plastic, and none of those options are going to result in a freezer safe product. And so part of custom processing is wrapping it so that it's long-term storage in their freezer because they're buying a whole or a half cow. See, I'd be interested in information on that because I don't understand how the wax alone is keeping it freezer safe for, because our product is good in the freezer between 3 and 5 years. So I don't know much about wax paper. There are options out there, but by and large, most processors don't use wax paper. Oh, yeah, okay. So it's double wrapped, yeah. Even at that, I'm not sure. I'm not sure the feasibility of that. In general, I would recommend when you're talking with your customers that plastic is the best. Yeah, thank you. Plastic is the best option for long-term storage. Maybe there's a beeswax option. We don't do that. We are set up to wrap the way that we wrap, and that does involve plastic. And yeah, I would. I don't even know anything about wax lined butcher paper is not recyclable, and then it does require a plastic wrap underneath it anyway, so you're into it plastic anyways, so but just helping people understand that this will be wrapped in plastic and that is good for long-term storage. Customization on a quarter of beef is limited because they're splitting that with the front. We get quarter beef customers through that want the sun and the moon, and we can't accommodate that, and that's not fair to the other customer that's sharing that half. So I'll let you guys, I know I'm kind of going over time here, but I'll let you guys read this list. This is just kind of my recommendation of what you could put together to help your customers truly understand start to finish the process. And then Mandy is one of the very first farmers that ever brought their animals to us, which makes her really special in my heart. And we're friends now. And she was one of the first farmers to really just take everything I ever posted online and on our website and really implement that into her sales pitch and working with her customers. And so I'd love to hear from Mandy about what are some specific things that you tell customers, because I would say that her retention rate is really high. She has 11 beef in our facility right now, and I feel like have we had any conflict at all?
No, not that I know of.
Yeah. So just we'd love to hear from you, Mandy, about how have you taken this and ran with it to help your customers be repeat customers and also just be happy customers.
Sure. Yeah. Now I'm happy to share what what we do. So I kind of wrote down the steps. I don't have a PowerPoint, but I wrote down some steps that we do to not only inform our customers, make them feel like they're part of the process, make sure they're educated and have a good experience from the time they put their deposit in until when they pick it up. So what I've come up with now is that we send in beef twice a year. We're hoping to move to 3 times a year, but for right now, what we have set up, we're doing twice a year. So I email our regular customers that have been with us for a long time. Sorry, my cat, this is her thing. She gets in my way. I email them and let them know that we are opening up deposits and that if they want beef this time around, that they should put in their deposit before we open it up to everybody. We get a lot of people word of mouth, friends and family referrals. So they get a heads up. We do have a website. I think even if it was just a 1-page, here's about our farm, here's how we raise our beef, our process for sending it to slaughter, even just having a 1-page website to send your customers to is probably helpful if you're sending in more than just a few at a time. Our customers put in their deposit and they fill out an online form, what share they want and put in their deposit and mark their offal request on that form. So I already have their basic offal requests ahead of time. And once we receive that deposit, I send a thank you email and invite them to ask any questions, especially if they're a first-time customer. That I'm here, I can answer questions, happy to. Then we have a span of time, and 30 days before slaughter, I'm sending reminders that, hey, you bought a beef share and it's coming up. Here's our slaughter date. Is there anything else that you would like to know? What can we help you with? And just let them know that I'll be sending out to look for an email with all the details and all the specifics 2 weeks ahead of time. So, and then that 2-week email is where we already know what their offal is. We confirm that with them. And then also what to expect when they pick up, questions about cut sheet orders, if there's anything that they want to clear up about their cut sheet order with North Fork. And from there, I just keep a spreadsheet. I have customer contact info, their offal order, And then I leave a space for the PO number that we get from North Fork that identifies their beef share with North Fork and our tag number. And then from there, I just have all the information and I can assign their weights easily and then send that spreadsheet to Laurabeth.
I'm actually going to jump.
Yeah.
I'm going to interrupt you, Mandy.
Yeah, go ahead.
As a processor, I love this so much. It really helps connect the carcass to the specific customer. And Mandy is so good about getting me that customer list within 24 hours so that people can start to get their cut sheet. Custom processing is a lot of paperwork and a lot of keeping things organized. So the more organized producers can be with getting weights assigned, getting customer contact information, those organs are, having a list of who wants that, like that organization helps us a lot, just not have things fall through the cracks, make sure that carcasses don't go to the wrong customer, that kind of thing that we never want to see happen. So that is what she described there is every processor's dream. So hopefully everyone's doing that for the processor.
Yeah, and we try to have everyone fill out their cut sheet at that 2-week mark of when I send that email with here's your instructions, here's the next steps, your beef is going to go to slaughter, and here's what happens from now on. And I try to get their cut sheets in ahead of time, even if we don't have a PO number and hanging weight, Laurabeth and I can work that out later. But that also just makes sure that, like, I think this time around or last time around, if there's anything that comes up with the cut sheets, or if somebody is not understanding the process or they end up with a question, we can address it long before it becomes an issue with, oh, your meat's already cut and we can't get you that now. And then from there, I would say that process of just reaching out and informing our customers through our website, through social media, and for those that don't do social media, through email and just phone calls, just reaching out to them and making sure they're well informed makes for a very smooth process. Like Laurabeth was saying, like if they're educated and they know what to expect, you're not running into conflict or issues down the line. They show up, they pick up their beef, and they're happy, and they come back next time when they're ready for beef again.
Hey, Mandy, I have a question.
Yeah.
How much time do you spend with a brand new customer?
It depends, but I would say probably on average, if they're brand new, probably about an hour total, which isn't a lot, but it's a lot when you have a lot of new customers, which just depending on the time, it just depends on how many new ones we have. But probably between emails back and forth at the beginning and at the end, an hour. Sometimes we'll have people that ask to come out and tour our farm just because they want to know where their meat's coming from and how it's raised. And so you add on time for that. But it's quite a time investment when you times that by 25 plus maybe 30 customers each time. So.
But then how much time do you feel like you spend with a repeat customer?
0, very little. Yeah, I may just get a quick email saying, thank you, we're so excited, or hey, can I make sure we get on this butcher date? But it's very little, and they know what to expect, and it becomes a very easy process. And my main goal is consistency. Of course, you're dealing with live animals and different breeds and ages of animals and raising them, but consistency is my main goal. And so I think that helps, is that they're expecting a consistent product and a consistent process. So keeping your process of collecting orders, answering their questions along the way, and then really that 30-day and 2-week mark to remind them and follow up is like what's kept it the most organized.
Do you feel like it's worth it overall? I mean, we invited you here, so I don't know if you say but truly, yeah, like what about it? What changes have you seen in your business?
Really, it's the retention of knowing that we can raise a certain amount of animals and expect to have them half sold out 6 months ahead of time by repeat customers, and know that that's a security there, that we're not having to go out and just put, really what benefits me the most is just with working in my other jobs and everything, is like putting out the information to new customers and new people, which is great because we want to offer grass-fed local beef to anybody that wants it, but it is really time consuming. And so it just saves a lot of time, and it saves a lot of conflict with people not knowing that their beef coming from a custom exempt beef share is not going to look exactly the same as it comes from the store, and just helping them understand that and the expectations of what they're going to get to put in their freezer. So not to say that we're not reaching out to new people all the time and wanting to educate, because it doesn't not only benefits us to do that, but for all local farmers, like for farmers that are selling to beef a year to neighbors and friends, or pork or lamb or goat or whatever they're selling, like the more education and the more that we can educate people on local and custom, the better. It just helps all around, and it helps us as a community. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Mm.
So we have just about 15 minutes left, so I want to make sure to open it up for folks that may have questions. You're welcome to unmute yourself and ask, or put it in the chat. Yeah, Darren.
Hi, thanks for having this. Very informative and really well done. I'm seeing some of you for the first time. It's nice to make your acquaintance. One of the things that I do with my shop is I see red flags. I'll say, a customer will say, well, Del Fox, they stole all my meat.
Oh, yeah.
Or North Fork, they stole all my meat. Well, when I hear that, I know that you guys are good people working hard and doing your best. I see that as a red flag, and I'm like, well, maybe you'd like to find a better butcher somewhere else, because I see that as a red flag, and I don't want your job. I don't want to work for people like you, and so like I try to chase those people off really quick, and I do it very, very curtly, because personally, I think the custom meat shops, they have enough struggles, and like with my shop, where my grandpa used to go 20 miles and get a truckload of 20 beef, like now I have to work all day to get 6. I got to go north, south, east, west to pick up, half a truckload. So my, like the custom business in my area, forgive the pun, it's dying, and for the most part, it's dead. But so I try to value those farmers that are really doing an awesome job by not putting them in contact with people like that. Like that's one of the things that I safeguard what I do in my sanity, because like I've done this, my whole life, and I try to be good at customer service, but like I don't got many years left, and I don't got time for this stuff. Like I don't got any time for people calling me a thief or calling my farmers bad people. Like I run them off, and I don't feel bad one bit. Like I tell them, go to another butcher. I don't want your work. And then I focus on my other fun things that I get to do. And so, I've just found that for myself as a way to safeguard my little bit of sanity because I love what I do, but it's, and we've all heard this saying, the 95, we spend 95% of our time making the 5% happy. I'm like, get out of here, 5%. I want nothing to do with you. And so, unfortunately, I push them off to you other nice butchers. But that's one of the things I've found for myself. I also think, it's really, and I haven't checked in a while, but like the WSDA needs to redo their website and really put a lot more information on there. Last time I looked, they were still referencing a single side. They didn't even reference a split side. So if a customer wanted to go through the work to find out information for themselves, and they would of course go to the WSDA, they don't even reference a split side. Like this is common knowledge that has been done forever, but then people will call me up and say, well, I only want the hind quarter. Well, it doesn't work that way. And so like the WSDA needs to redouble their efforts in so many aspects of what they do. I could go on and on about their criticism of their labeling and those labeling requirements, but I have to come under thumb. I get it. But there's a lot of things about the WSDA where they need to step up and really take on some of these different aspects that, Laurabeth, you've done a great job piecing it together on your own, and all these other people have pieced it together. But it would be nice if the WSDA would really like be the figurehead for us and solve some of these problems, or at least have a place where our customers can go to find reliable information. So those are like 2 points that I really wanted to bring up throughout this very, very well put together presentation. So thanks for letting me be here, and nice job. Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Darren. It is actually validating to hear another processor talk about like how the conflict can really wear you down and take the joy out of what is an amazing industry. And so I would definitely take a different approach, but I've only been in business for 3 years. Maybe I'm not quite burnout yet, but just helping people really understand. But where do they go to understand that? Where is the onus? Is it on the processor? Is it on the farmer? And really at the scale that we're all running businesses, I would assume, speaking for Darren as well, it really is on the person selling the beef to help their customer understand what it is that they're buying. So it is the contention does wear you down, and it takes away from the joy of what is an incredible industry. So helping people just know what they're doing just goes such a long ways. And maybe the state can get involved at some scale and put together what is a comprehensive list of expectations for custom beef. And like buying a hindquarter is definitely not on that list.
Yeah, very much heard, Darren. Thank you for sharing all of that information. And yeah, I pledge to work on it.
Oh, on your maternity leave?
Well, maybe after maternity leave.
Yeah,
But
okay.
we are, to that end, we are working on an app, and I know that's not everybody's favorite thing, but WSU had money and excitement about it, and so we're trying to make sure that it actually works for folks. It'll be consumer focused, helping people understand the translation from either live weight or hanging weight to take home meat, and then also helping people understand what size share that they should buy and what that's going to look like. So I'd love input from folks. I know Laura and I talked about this yesterday, but and some beta testers, because it'll only be as good as it actually gets information from the people doing this day to day.
Sarah, would you please modernize the label ordering? Oh my God, 1986 wants it back. Like, it is so awful. Honestly, please modernize that. If it's so important, please modernize the label ordering.
Okay. That's, yeah, from food safety. Okay. I can't guarantee that it'll happen quickly, but I can at least look at it.
I believe in you, Sarah.
Lead.
I believe in you. You're a workhorse.
Well, and it is on my long-term agenda to keep poking them about having an online pay option for your license renewals, to be able to do all of that stuff online. I think that would be helpful. Yeah, keep sending me a list, and as long as I have a job, we'll keep trying to fix what we can.
I will say that one of the things I love about the custom industry is actually how little oversight there is. Outside of having a licensed facility, this transaction is really between the farmer and the consumer. And so I think the fact that there is avenues for farm direct custom sales is absolutely a wonderful thing. And I'm not sure I'm a huge advocate on more regulation on this side.
I agree.
And that is something that we are actively looking at as a department. There's a whole ag viability study, and it's my job to keep poking them and be like, hey, this isn't just about farming. Like, we have to remember all types of food processing, but especially meat processing, to make sure that we're not putting in regulations that are going to put people out of business. But the more that I hear that from folks, and the more I get specific examples of like what you're running up against, one, we can troubleshoot them together, but two, just hearing and being able to share that with our policy team, with the people doing this study, is incredibly helpful. Folks want to hear from the people actually doing the work. So I appreciate that. Oh yeah, Misha just put in the chat a link to our buying guides, although I'll relook at that to see about the split side, because that is
I
and
saw on,
oversight.
sorry to cut you off, Sarah. I saw
Oh,
someone
good.
online today selling front quarters and hind quarters. And I was
Interesting.
like, why would anyone want to buy a hind quarter? But I mean, that's just personal preference. But I
I guess
think there
if
are
it's
butchers that still
cheaper,
sell that way.
yeah, if it's, I mean, if you're looking for a bargain, maybe, and the farmer wants to do that, sure. But yeah, split sides or mixed sides, sometimes people call them too.
Can
Um,
I say a word of caution too on the language? Because my husband is a farmer and was selling quarters, but the way he invoiced it was split, right? Because it's a split quarter, but the customer did not understand that and they assumed that they were getting a half a cow.
No, no.
Uh, and it was expensive. So they were like, wait, you're way overcharging me. And we had to be like, no, that's the cost. And it's a split front and half. So just make sure it's clear up front what you mean when you say something like split.
That is such a good example for the industry problem at large. Like, that's a very specific thing. Like, that makes sense to everyone in this chat, exactly what that meant. But the average consumer had no idea. So we're up against that, but about 100 different things on one transaction. There's just so many things that are not intuitive to a general consumer.
And I will say, like, I think the people that we've been selling to probably over the last 10 years has shifted to people that may have had some knowledge and had ordered meat before, and now it's really shifted to people like that have no idea, who have never met a farmer, who have never had a custom slaughter done, who have zero knowledge. So we went from having some that had, some prior knowledge to now we have so many that just don't know at all. So all these resources through the WSDA and things that we collaborate on with our processors and just putting the word out there is really helpful.
I actually have a theory on that, Mandy, and I think we are just generationally getting away from people that bought most of their food farm
Mhm.
direct. And
Yeah,
so,
for
like, my
sure.
parents buying a side of beef was just like how you ate beef. They're almost
Yeah.
80. And then my friends are like, you do what? They just can't even picture it.
Yeah.
So capturing new generation of consumers that don't have the historical context of how it works
Yeah.
requires that hour-long phone call.
Yeah. It's like it does. It feels like in some ways we're starting over where it kind of went out and then it's coming back to where everybody wants to buy local, but it's definitely starting. It feels a little bit like starting from scratch. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Now grocery store prices are so high, though, it's about the same as the yield you get off of a farm beef, and everybody knows the quality is better. So that's been a real big push. I've seen a lot of that, where people are. You're right. They're just like, well, what do I got to do? And I'm like, well, buy a freezer, and that's about it. I'll call the farmer for you. So.
And another thing I like to say is, like, if you're buying a half a beef, your customer is getting that whole half a beef. And I hear customers all the time be like, oh, did I do this right? Did I do it wrong? And it's like, there is no wrong way to fill out a cut sheet. You're getting a whole beef, whether it be in a big chunk or a steak or a stew meat, or like, there is no wrong way to figure out a cut sheet. So really destigmatizing the selection of cuts. I have noticed farmers that go to just offering a standard cut, like you get a nice assortment, and then the customer's like, okay, great. They don't have to figure it out. So maybe not over complicating the process. If you don't have a particular customer, don't make it harder than it needs to be. That's not every customer. Some are very particular, but some don't care. Then don't make them, fill out their cut sheet for them. We see that a lot and it works really well.
We don't let them know there's a right and wrong. We just criticize them when we're cutting it. We don't tell them.
Secrets out.
If you grind their chuck, if you grind your chuck, we're not going to be friends. That's just the fact of the matter. Like, we are not going to be friends. It's just the way it goes in the world.
It does make great hamburger. But yeah, sometimes we're like, they're doing what? But it's custom beef, they get to choose.
Oh, that's a good question, Sherilyn. Yeah.
Cheryl Ann, you should ask your processor for their standard cut. Almost every processor has a way. My standard cut at my shop is how I cut my beef. So I think a standard cut would just be specific on the shop that you use.
Oh.
Oh
right.
dear. Oh, you're in for it. No, I'm kidding. Feel free to email me. I'd be happy to tell you what I do. Grind a lot of the round. Grind the chuck. No, sorry. Sorry, Darren, I didn't say that. Don't grind the chuck. Grind a lot of the round. That would be my standard cut suggestion. Sorry.
All right. Well, we're right at 11:30. Thanks, Darren, also for popping that in the chat too. Oh yeah, Laurabeth, do you want to share your email here? We can follow up with
Yeah, my email is Josh, which is my husband's name. He started this at northforkpacking.com. Or you can find me on Facebook, North Fork Packing. Yeah, there we go. Thanks, Sarah. And I'd be happy. I'm pretty much an open book and I love sharing information. So especially if you're a new processor, I would definitely have some some words of wisdom.
Well, thank you again so much, Laurabeth and Mandy. This has been great. I've learned a lot, and hopefully folks also on the call have learned a lot. And I will get this up on YouTube as soon as I can and send up a follow-up that includes the link to that. And yeah, please come back for the next one. Hopefully in April.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah, for putting this together and inviting me. And I hope the rest of your pregnancy goes really well. We're looking forward to seeing you in the fall when you're back online.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you.